Welcome to Nation Underdog. I'm Mark Harvey. Here in the United States, when you're talking to entrepreneurs and people who are purveyors of international business, quite often you hear lots of great things about globalization, how it saves money, how the functioning of the international economy creates low prices and enables products to move swiftly and easily across international borders. But we might want to pause and ask ourselves the question, what's wrong with globalization? Is there a downside? And so the discussion that we'll have for the remainder of this will be all about the dark side of globalization. So anyway, let's talk about globalization here for a few minutes. If you remember, last time we talked about globalization, we thought it was awesome. My question is this: if globalization is so awesome, why do people protest it?
Hello. I'm sitting here in front of the computer, just sort of having a look at the daily news, and called to mind an article from the Wall Street Journal. Here, the headline is, "How Global Web of Activists Give Coke Problems in India." It's about a guy by the name of Amit Srivastava, and he lives in California, and he's gathered together a global network of activists to protest the actions of Coca-Cola in India. And of course, this is highly relevant to this whole idea of globalization and the fact that you have one guy, basically, who's taking on Coca-Cola. In fact, his organization, he's got one full-time, one part-time employee versus the 39,000 employees that Coke has worldwide. He has about 60,000 in grants. Coke has 21.96 billion. And he successfully is able to shut down a number of Coke operations in India.
I mean, honestly, every time there's a G20 or a G8 conference, there's a bunch of pot-smoking, long-haired, hippie college kids that are out there like, man, globalization's bad, dude, right? So my question is, are they wrong, and is the rest of the world right? Because like I said, I know I convinced you all that globalization was awesome. So are these people just a bunch of idiots, or do they have something intelligent to say? But tonight we're going to talk a little bit more about the ugly side, because that's something we've really neglected up to this point. Up to this point it's just been awesome, efficiency, specialization, great. Not necessarily the case, and not for everybody, and not necessarily in an equal way. Maybe there's a benefit to those who are at the top of the international pyramid. No, trade isn't always equal, and maybe these people are concerned about those who are a little bit on the poorer side. If you expose your country, any country, to the forces of the most powerful businesses on earth, that's a pretty scary competition. And maybe that means a more conglomeration of major multinational corporations. You have oil companies that were due to an earlier form of globalization, really at that time it was called imperialism, powerful countries going in, taking whatever resources they had and taking advantage of it, making personal arrangements with the government to make use of this land in ways that benefited the businesses that occupy that area. Well, we'll say there's many problems with globalization, and some of the biggest ones have to do with labor, and that's one reason why we're focusing on labor tonight. Is I mentioned, a lot of it has to do with where labor goes, where people get to take advantage of the cheapest labor, what the status of people are in those countries, whether or not they're exploited. These are all issues that really are directly concerned with globalization as well. Globalization has a tendency to drive outsourcing, right? As you open your markets, you get a bigger labor market, that has an effect. And sometimes that means that people in one economy, in one area, are going to lose their jobs and it's going to go someplace else. What about some of the concerns that I briefly mentioned earlier, like sweatshops? I mean, a lot of these people are concerned about human rights, and they honestly are concerned about the plight of workers. They're concerned about people who are just making pennies a day. They don't like it. They don't like the way governments treat their people if we do business with them.
The United States and other Western multinationals are finding their way pretty much everywhere around the globe into developing countries for the purpose of not only exporting their products, but of course trying to capitalize on cheaper labor and cheaper goods as well. Let's say a multinational corporation that wants to move to a developing country because they know they can sort of push that state around because they're relatively more powerful. They can go in and take advantage of some cheap labor rates, some cheap resources. Ultimately, they may enlist the help of a major state, like, say, the United States, to get involved and to actually pay off a local dictatorship or other sort of government to make sure that these wages and these prices stay low, even if that means sometimes killing off union leaders or engaging in other sorts of practices, because making money is sort of the bottom line in this kind of economy. So certainly there are great benefits to it. You get cheap Nikes and other good stuff. You like cheap Nikes? You like cheap consumer products? See, that's awesome. So there are good things about it, but unfortunately it's not all happy and all good for absolutely everybody.
Mark, I didn't know that my Nikes that they hurt people. I thought I got the cheap Nikes and it made me happy. But now I'm gonna cry myself. It's because I'm not in a
And then there's the environmental concern too, really. I mean, think about it. If we raise regulations in this country and make it more difficult to do business, as in sort of like we can't let these businesses dump crap in our streams anymore, dump sludge in our streams, then let's go to a country where we're allowed to do that. And so people concerned about the environment, they're concerned about globalization, because that just makes it easier for businesses to just up and leave and go someplace else and do the same thing on the other side of the globe and just destroy the environment there.
So here we are, we have Coke in India, and here's the story. In the southern state of Kerala, local officials shut down a $16 million Coke bottling plant in March 2004 over claims by local residents and Indian activists that it drained and polluted local water supplies. And there's other documentation also of pollution in the levels of Coke, in the water supply, the use of pesticides, and so on, and people being really concerned about this. I suppose you're probably sitting there thinking, wow, it's a good thing here we live here in America where we have environmental regulations and ways to try to prevent that sort of thing from happening. And of course it also might make you think a little bit about the ethical implications of multinational corporations going to other countries and what they can get away with when they're there. Well, before you jump to any conclusions, I suggest that you get on the internet and type in the words Wal-Mart and environment or pollution, and you'll get a long list of violations by Wal-Mart and a number of settlements that they had to go into with not just the U.S. EPA, but also with the protection agencies in many states as a result of them storing pesticides and fertilizer and all sorts of things out in their parking lots. When it rained, a lot of these toxic materials would end up draining into water supplies and poisoning people. We have the weight of the U.S. federal government, and we can't stop Wal-Mart from polluting parking lots that then run off into groundwater.
So are these people total idiots?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Now, I'm not saying that what I told you before about globalization is wrong. In fact, I'll argue that it's absolutely right. But I'm also going to tell you that these protesters also are probably right. They're probably correct too. There are people, maybe including us, who are working in questionable conditions and challenging conditions, and what are their needs and what should we do to try to address those, if anything?
There are a couple of questions that I think you should think about. First of all, what role does the individual have, not just in politics, but in economics and business? Clearly, one guy can make an incredible difference in trying to improve business and governmental practices. A second question I think you should ask is, what is the role of business and ethics? How does that fit together? And finally, I think you might want to ask yourself, what kind of role do you have, if not in your business or home, but in your country and community as well?